Hello, and welcome to our live stream of Kim Van Sommeren's exhibition, The Slant of Line, at the J. Reinhardt Gallery. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I'm thrilled to introduce Kim Van Sommeren. So hello.
Hello.
I want to start by saying the Slant of Line, this exhibition opens tonight and is on view through September 12th. So you've got 6 weeks to come in and see it. The gallery is open Thursday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you can pop in, but if you would like to, and it would be great if you could make an appointment, you could just email me at judith@jreinhardtgallery.com, which you can also just go to the website and click to make an appointment. Also, this show is going to be part of the Seattle Deconstructed Art Fair. That was a wonderful community effort thrown together by all of the art dealers here in Seattle. That is through the whole month of August. Go to that website, just seattledeconstructedartfair.com. Take a look at the many galleries that are participating and the shows that they have. And Kim Van Sommeren show is one of them.
So honored.
I'm so glad that we've been able to put together the show, especially in the weird times that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think art is necessary and needed, and I feel like this show has been a breath of fresh air.
Oh, so good to hear. Well, I think we've all been making, and I think we've all been sort of looking, but there's nothing better than seeing something in person, you know? So I think I'm super grateful that that's even an opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, and to see this is great. You guys are all going to get like a nice little view of the show tonight, or of the exhibition tonight. Yeah. But you do want to come and see these in person because there's so many fantastic details that I'm just enamored with. So shall we have a little bit of celebratory toast? So let's see about this. Yay. So in celebration of Kim Van Sommeren, please raise your glass if you have one. That's a little bubbly. Beautiful. And cheers to you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's good. So, Kim, talk to me a little bit about your work. I love these. So your process is amazing. There's so many details involved.
Yeah.
There's so much behind the work as far as meaning and architecture and building and layering. And tell us a little bit about this show, how it kind of came together, and your vision for these beautiful pieces.
Yeah. So, you know, I've been thinking a little bit about it. I've been making these sort of forts, I guess I call them, for about 10 years. And so they started out by me wanting to make sure that I could slow down a little bit and step away from so many different techniques within printmaking. One of my jobs at the university is to teach students in printmaking all of the different techniques that are available for them to learn.
And you use a lot of them.
And I use tons of them. It's sort of like, you know, being a master builder and you have every tool that the store will offer, and you just get so excited to use each one because each one is an amazing, fun, deeply historical, traditional thing to use. And so I think I had developed so many tools over the years that I just, I would get so awestruck and not knowing which one to use anymore, because, and then I would spend so much time doing that. And so I wanted to step back, and I focused so much on just the idea of dry point. And dry point is the idea of taking a sharp tool and drawing a line into a piece of plastic or metal or wood, and then printing from that. So the idea of just working from a line and then the collection of lines and the grouping of lines, whether that be density or how hard you push into that plate, what it looks like on paper, that became something that I became much more interested in, as opposed to so many different tools. So I guess for the past 10 years, I've been focusing on architecture as a way to have this makeup of lines, panels of lines, lines that fall, lines that construct, lines that make things look full, lines that create mass or the absence of mass, weight or the absence of weight. And so with that, I just sort of developed this body of work that that was fun to just focus on one thing, that line. And so over the years, I've studied architecture, and you see architecture on a daily basis. And I grew up in a really, really small town in Wisconsin of about 2,500 people.
Whoa.
And I grew up right next to a farming implement. I have to put that down. I grew up right next to a farming implement where we had tractors and all kinds of bulldozers and things that moved and pushed earth around. And as a girl, I never really sort of was permitted, I guess is the word that I'm looking for, to know what those things were. Those were for the men, those were for the farmers, those were for the people that did work. And so by living next to this, I became really intrigued about what those things did. And I didn't really need to know, but I loved the shapes of them, and I loved the idea that they did things. And I didn't know what they did, but I loved that idea. So I paired that a little bit with the idea of looking at industrial equipment. I work in an education field at a research university, and so there are all kinds of tools and things that are around campus, and especially with building on campus, you see a lot of construction equipment. Again, I don't know what any of them do, but I love the look of them. I love that they are forceful, that each piece of that machine does something, and I could care less what it does, but I love the idea that it does something specific. So, in the Northwest, we grew up around a lot of forestry equipment. So, we go up to the cabin east of the mountains, and you see a lot of forestry equipment going around. And so I became really interested in sort of those types of things that destroy. It's a terrible thing, but we do, wood is something that is necessary for our livelihood. So, so that's sort of where this show started to develop a little bit more, was the idea of having all of these structures that did something, whether or not what they did was important or even known, but they all do something. And to this day, that could change, and that's maybe where I get some of the titles from.
I was going to ask about those, because all of the pieces are kind of ER words.
Yes, they are. Yeah. So like this one right here is based on a scissors lift. And so scissors lifts are something that I love, the idea that they can compact and they can stretch out, and they're made out of this hulky metal, but yet they're so gentle and breezy when they go up. And sort of it's this sort of male-dominated sort of looking piece of equipment, but then when it's stretched out, it sort of is this graceful idea. Yeah. So this one is called Slifter, based on the scissors lift. So it sort of lifts up and down. So that's sort of the basis of a lot of these pieces, especially with the pieced work, where I take a lot of silk tissue and pre-print a lot of the ideas and information on them, and we can talk about that too.
Yeah, we'll get
how
there.
all of that is done. And I think within these, a lot of the pieced work, I became really interested in the femininity of some of these machines that I'm making. In life, a lot of these machines look very masculine, very hard-edged, very heavy. And I became interested in the idea of making something that was a little bit more feminine by adding some of the more pink tones and flesh tones, and having them be a little bit more ethereal looking. So that's something that I think a lot about in terms of making some of these things look a little bit more graceful as they move.
Well, and, so there's a catalog for the exhibition that is also on the website that you can look and read for free, where Sharon Arnold had graciously written this amazing essay.
Such a good essay.
And she talks about your work calling these pieces transformative machines.
Yeah.
And I find that very, very apt. And because I also found like they're so heavy and they're so masculine, but they have this feminine quality to them. And I was like, is that the silk tissue? Is that just the delicate line work? Is it the process? But there's, I love hearing more about kind of where
they come from,
where that comes from. I feel like there's this emotion in them that I did not see until I saw them in person.
Yeah, I think so.
Hint, nudge.
I think too, whether or not we'll talk a little bit more about COVID and what that does to the working process, especially with a with an artist who's female, who works full time and has twin 5-year-olds.
Right.
So you have to carve out this really special amount of time to work. And then within that time, you know, each moment is precious. And I love getting into that precious moment where it, you know, whether it's 15 minutes or whether it's 8 hours, you know, in the middle of the night, because that's the only time I can work. I love getting into that detail because it's quiet, it's calming, it's almost like a metronome, where it's one of those things that I look forward to every day, just to have a relationship with that single piece of paper.
Yeah.
And that there's something about that, you know, working on paper has always been very, very important to me. You know, I think a lot about the history of paper. Like, the paper has a history. It has a rich history of, you know, things being printed on it. Money is printed on paper. Our Constitution is printed on paper. You know, I mean, I think, you know, you could go on and on about that idea, but paper is important to us. And I have the pleasure of working with it every day. And I love the touch of it. I love the fact that it folds. And, you know, some papers, if you roll them up, they fall back out and they never hold a memory. And some papers do hold a memory, like if you are, you know, at a wedding and you see the little bride and groom thing, you know, you curl it up and it stays nice and tight.
Yeah.
You know, there's something about that I love. So, do
you have a favorite paper that you use? And you also talk about using the silk tissue.
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about those materials?
Yes. So, I'm a paper snob, like a lot of printmakers. But I also love, you know, when I was in undergrad, I became really, really interested in found papers. So anything that was, I've always been interested in the dichotomy of paper too, where there's something that's really thick and heavy. You know, I'm drawn to papers that are white, but then when you get them next to something that is more technology-based white, it's not actually that white, it's different. So I am interested in, there are a few papers that I love that are more Western style printing papers, but only as a paper to draw on. But recently I have been absolutely fascinated by silk tissue. And so silk tissue is a paper that is made from the Gompi plant. So it's this Gompi material that, you know, it has a range of different price points, and I choose the cheapest one because I go through so much of it. But it really is like skin.
And that's what you're collaging with
what I'm collaging and printing with it. And it makes it so difficult to print on, because if you get that piece of silk tissue wet, it has no glue holding it together.
Right.
So it falls apart like toilet paper.
Oh.
So, you know, it goes through so many different things, even just going through the printing press, and then I print on top of that with oil-based ink and water and gum arabic. And then I dry it, and then I flatten it, and then I cut it, and then I put glue on it. And, you know, so by the time it actually sticks to the paper, I'm glad it's there. But I love that idea that I get to sort of force these things to go through all of these different means of through the making process.
Yeah, there's no simplicity in the making. You had sent me a few videos of kind of your hands making the work, and I found it meditative in a lot of ways. So and we have a little time lapse I'd like to share with you guys of Kim's working process, and it's really cool. And it seems like this very small movements.
Yep.
But I know watching it that you are just, it is very precise and very deliberate.
Yeah, and I love that. I love having that, you know, so much of my making is about precision, and so much of it is about not wanting to have that precision. And I get really excited about that sort of thing.
About precision.
Yes.
Well, and you can tell from the way you're making the marks. And part of that video is the carbon transfer paper, which I'm excited kind of for our next segment to talk about this specific series, because it's probably my absolute favorite. One, because of how meditative it is to watch you work, and then two, because the final imagery you've put together is just remarkable.
Thanks.
So talk to us a little bit about these. These are the last pieces you created for the show.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and you know, it's for my whole life I've been really, really struggling with the idea of stepping aside from print. You know, if it doesn't go through a press, then, you know, why would I want to make it? Because I'm a printmaker, right? And so it's been really hard for me to even sort of draw onto paper because I need to have that middleman in between. And so oddly enough, with COVID, we've had to teach a series of online classes, and I've had to make a lot of videos for students to do printing at home or mark making at home. And one of those was the idea of using carbon paper, and which is sort of related to a technique that we do in printmaking, which is called reverse monotype. But really, it's just carbon paper. And so you can actually make your own carbon paper, but I just, you know, get it from Office Depot. So it's like what we do in COVID is sort of just like survival mode. So we have to find things to make. So so these are the carbon pieces, and these are all made with just sheets of carbon. And by using printmaking techniques like stenciling things out, so I can only draw within a certain area and everything else is blocked out, so it doesn't dirty the remaining paper, has been really, really fun.
So so to me, I look at these and think, okay, there was some kind of stencil and went within, and that was just the part you blocked out,
just
not necessarily a stencil.
Yeah, exactly. So some of these are, you know, there's still silk tissue collage on some of these. There's also some silk tissue just placed down, and then I'm drawing on top of that silk tissue. So there is silk tissue that's still involved. I can't get rid of it. It's such a luxurious surface to draw on. Yeah. But all of these were made by using that carbon paper. But I've also been really intrigued with using different mark making tools. So like a Click pencil, but not having the lead up. So you're just working with the tip of that. Or like a ballpoint pen through the carbon paper, and then my favorite is drawing with a needle.
So is that what was in that?
Probably,
exactly. There was, okay.
Yeah. So there is sort of this delight that I find in, you know, when I make these, I don't have an overall goal. I have no idea what they're going to look like when they're done. So I sort of make one little area and then step back, and then make another area, step back and react. And that's how I always have worked. I have a hard time making a big plan, even though I am a planner, but I sort of like to have that reactionary method of working whenever I work with these, because I think it really allows these to not conform to anything specific or particular. And so each of these is sort of a jump to the next move when I'm making these.
And are you thinking of kind of the transformative machine of you're kind of doing this in a very mechanical way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And then on to kind of the next part.
Yes.
And then overall it becomes its own animal.
So yeah, so a lot of the times when I work with, you know, you start with a blank piece of paper, and I usually will look to the previous work in terms of a shape to start with. So you know, I don't know I can't remember the order that these were made, but I always look back to things to sort of think about shape and think about how that mass can be created. I think a lot about weight and how, you know, having darks on the bottom really pulls things down, and having more translucent and ethereal things, and how it really lifts things up. But I also like to think about weight and cantilevering weight, and how, you know, an appendage sticking out is going to allow that structure to look like it's tipping over a little bit. So a lot of the times these start out by, you know, this was maybe the top at one point. And then I will make another mark and sort of step back and say, no, that's the bottom. So, you know, so that's always interesting to me to sort of think about that. And I do take photographs of them at every stage. Which is kind of fun, because I can kind of see the development of all of these as I work.
So I've had some interesting conversations with a handful of people where people either feel like they are opened up to them or they're drawn into them. And for me, this one in particular, especially this negative space, where it's a cityscape and you're walking between two buildings, and that's the path you're going to take. And for me, just that little bit of negative space draws me right in. And the detail on these are it's wonderful to hear that you're using all of these different implements, because it just kind of adds to it.
Yeah, I know. And it's for somebody that relies so heavily on, you know, heavy tools and equipment. You know, now I'm relying on specialized lights,
right,
and tiny pieces of things, and tweezers, and little tiny brushes to brush glue on, and I'm probably going to need glasses really soon. But yeah, I think, it brings up a really interesting thing of sort of space and how you as the viewer are sort of led into these, because none of these have any sort of figure ground relationship. It's not necessarily an item that is somewhere in Iowa or an item that's somewhere on the moon. These could be, you don't really know the scale of these at all until at all, I guess. But it is really fun to see them as a group.
Yeah.
I will say they sort of interact with each other, and they do have relationships that I enjoy seeing very much.
Yeah, these were fun to put together.
Yeah.
I love.
And these. I will say too, with these and with the Piecedworks, a lot of the line collages that I've been making, so the lithography, paper lithography transfer methods, those lines are not coming from just sort of random lines. I say that and I'm like, they are sort of random lines, but I'm actually making those lines through computer software on a Word document.
Oh.
Because, I think we're all, a lot of us are familiar with Word, and I sort of think about that as like the most mechanical line that I have ever worked with. So I make these sort of Word documents that are just full of line, and I think I have maybe one or two like original documents.
Oh my
gosh.
I
photocopy those hundreds of times and eschew them and make them different and larger and smaller and things like that. So it is interesting to see like how thick this line is and how it really, really sort of yanks you in versus how thin that same line is in a different color.
It's the same line.
It's the same line, but it's just shrunk down.
Wow.
Yeah. So I enjoy those. I enjoy those mind games a little bit.
It is.
Yeah.
I think with all of these, with these pieces and these lines, they're almost like Rorschach tests in a way, where you're looking at them and you want to imbue it with something.
Right.
And even for me, when I first saw them, I'm like, okay, well, your work's about architecture. Your work is kind of about these machines. Your work is about industrial objects. How is that these? And I find my brain wanting to fill in those gaps. But even just as themselves, like this one I think is incredibly elegant, where you have these really light lines down to thick lines to back to the light lines, and in and of itself, it's just a beautiful piece. And I think beautiful and aesthetically beautiful, but then also knowing how much work is involved.
Yeah.
So have you found that this series really came about because COVID kicked you out of your studio?
Yeah, I do. It sort of, became an idea of like, what do I have at home to work with? Because I can no longer play around with acid and use tools and things like that in the studio. And a lot of this was just very accessible, including the size.
Yeah.
I've always sort of worked in this general size. But even saying that, I started with these being sort of 11 by 15, and I kept cutting some of them, with, like hacking off the top because I didn't like it, which is also something that I've never done before. It's sort of like I've never been permitted to start over or to have a second thought.
Ooh.
I've always just sort of gone with it. And so now I'm like, I can just cut that right off.
You can do that.
Exactly. So yeah, and I think, a lot of us are working from home, and we just sort of have the time, and it's been actually very heartwarming to see the different directions that you can go as an artist if you put down your guard a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially if you're married to your medium. I've always said, like I said, I've been married to my medium for years, and I'm a tried and true printmaker, and I'm never gonna say, and it's really hard because I still call these prints too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they are these reverse monotype, but I can't get over that hump. And I love relying on that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. I think you're free to do a lot more, but you're grounded.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I would have ever been able to get here without the previous work. And I think that's the biggest thing.
For sure.
And I love that natural way of thinking and the natural way of making work.
And maybe
too.
that's why I love these, is they're just kind of this culmination of all the things.
Yeah. And I'm going to keep making it. And I think they're going to get bigger. Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at your piecework. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to go that way. I screwed it all up. It's okay. So these pieces you called your piecework.
Yeah.
And talk to me a little bit about what that means.
Well, I think, this is these, let's see, how many do I have? 8 of these, maybe more?
Yeah.
You sort of lose track
Yeah.
by making so many. These, I would consider these sort of an extension of a show that I had maybe a year and a half ago with Sharon Arnold at Bridge Productions, where I started the investigation of piecing together some of the forms that I made with the Forts and Houses series that I made in 2010. And those actually came about because I was on maternity leave.
Oh.
So I had all of these dry points that I made, and I had printed them, and I had printed these same dry points on silk tissue, and I had them all at home, but I wanted to make new work, and I wasn't able to go in and print. And so the only way that I could think of was to cut up all of these old pieces of architecture that I had printed from the Forts and Houses series. And so I started cutting them all up and making new things from them. So a lot of them were from just a few of the different forts and houses, and I would, put them together, and they would be new structures each time. And so this is an extension of that, where and instead of using the forts and houses, I started using that software. So they're all from the same Word document. And so for me to understand that quality of line can be eradicated, it can be stretched and pulled and made thinner, and in a lot of these cases painted with gesso, which is so scary.
On the silk tissue.
Yeah, on the silk tissue, and then on the actual paper themselves, and then using some of the carbon as well. So that became sort of this working process too. So a lot of these were started pre-COVID, and then some of them were post-COVID, and that's where I really started to investigate the possibilities of allowing more things to creep into the work, which is really great.
So these and some of the others have a bit more of these colors in them that are all these kind of peachy pinkies.
Yes.
Talk to us about like why and what that. Yeah.
So I've always been, someone who has had an interest in color, but never bold enough to go down the red road or down the blue road or the orange road. So I sort of dabble in the sort of the lighter tones. They're sort of like, I think about makeup. I think about like the shades of makeup that I wear and all of those peaches and pinkies and things. But I also think about my grandmother. I think about her bathroom and how everything was very lush and pink and peach and sort of overdone.
Such a grandmother's bathroom.
So flowery and So I think a lot about that when I would make these. And even when you are in the shop making and mixing inks, black is its own thing. But once you start investigating color, especially subtle color, you could print for days, weeks, months, years, and never make the same color twice.
Wow.
And I love that idea of having sort of this range that I print in, sort of this pink and peach and soft tones that I can never do twice. Yeah. So I started incorporating a lot of these into these pieces as I have in other works. But a lot of the times I would sort of add that to allow for that sense of femininity and lightness to come into the work too. Because I think they get so heavy-handed with the black and the white and gray tones, which, gray is a whole ball of wax that, again, you could print gray for days, weeks, months and never have the same gray. And I love that. I love looking at the subtle things that happen, especially when you print on different papers. You could print the same gray on 2 different papers and they're 2 different things.
So in this one, there's this almost whiter paper
that
comes out like really contrasting.
Yeah.
And I think that along with these different grays and these peaches and creamy colors, you say you don't do much with color, but your balance is just fantastic.
Yeah, I think I teeter on that edge. And a lot of the times when I work, especially for this series, I will work on one piece and finish it, and work on another piece and finish it, because I have to compartmentalize for sure. But with this, I really allowed myself, because I had the time and the space, to allow a few of them to come up together. And so I started making some of these, and these were on more of a cream tone paper. And I realized that it lost its life And by life, I mean sort of that white of the paper.
Yeah.
Especially when compared to maybe the one next to it, they are quite different. So I started to include things like gesso on top of them to bring back that life a little bit more. And you know, we say that in printmaking, where you know, if you completely blanket the area with color, you lose the life of the paper. And so I realized I was doing that same thing. And once I started doing that, I became really excited about that possibility of having those little light areas trickle through again. That would allow it to sustain a little bit more mass and breathability. And it also is really fun to draw on. So again, it's one of those things where it was like, man, I let myself have a little bit of freedom, and now I want all the freedom.
Now you want it all.
So yeah, so just drawing on gesso is another thing that I have allowed myself to do too. So that's been really exciting.
I'm excited to see like where this pushes you next. I feel like this show has been very transformative in a way for you.
Yeah.
And also I think pushing yourself. I mean, because I had seen a lot of your forward works and thinking of like the balance of things and the balance of structures and the balance of the places we live. Yeah. And these have a lot of that, but just, we had a client today say, you just keep getting better, and that's annoying, because I said, no, that's the best thing, that's the best part. Because seeing you develop and change and grow in this process that you've been so well versed in for so long, to see new and exciting things come out of it is really fantastic. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
It's been such a great moment to have a space to show these in, and also to have them all up in the same room as opposed to my little studio or on my screen. You know, they are a lot of work, you know, but every moment that I've been involved in them has been just such a pleasure.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think it definitely comes out in the work where they do feel like they do hit you, and there's these moments with them that are really wonderful.
Thanks.
So now I guess if we have any questions from anybody tuning in, type them in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm going to check real quick on my Instagram feed to see what questions, if any, came through. Let's see. Oh, lots of people saying beautiful work, so that's great.
That's good. Any questions, John? They're thinking.
Well, we have. There's a delay, so.
Oh yeah.
on the YouTubes.
I think the biggest question that I get from so many people is, how long does each one take? And you know, I started thinking about it, and for a while I would start giving answers like, oh, this one took like 2 weeks, or you know, whatever. And somebody, I remember, said, never tell people how long it took, because you know, they say, well, how old are you? Then it's taken that long because of all of the things that you've done along the way.
Everything you've learned.
Exactly. So, so that's my answer, is as long as I've been alive.
Dree says, so great to see the show, really fantastic conversation. You two are awesome.
Oh, thanks, Dree.
And I think you just answered her question of how long does it Okay. GMC Savage asks, which one is the twins' favorite?
Which one is the twins' favorite? Well, oddly enough, they are not allowed in the studio. My cat is allowed. But you know, bringing up twins and you know, the idea of duality, having you know, two different things in your life, that has been a really, really present thing in my work. If you look at, if not all of the pieces, a lot of them have two structures that go up, and so that is something that that I think a lot about, is having this idea of two in my life.
Because you're stuck with them.
Yeah. So yeah, we are stuck together. Yeah. So that is one thing about having twins. You know, it's definitely unique in having two babies at once. You know, versus having two children that are different ages. It's all a learning curve, and I have a lot of support from you know, my husband and from family and friends, and you know, but it is something that I think a lot about, and so you'll see that very prevalent in the work having two things go up.
Oh, I love that.
Do you have a favorite printmaking method to teach?
Online teaching or in person? I would say, in person, I taught at Pratt Fine Arts Center here in Seattle. I taught for a number of years, and I still teach there occasionally for workshops. And I will say, hands down, my most favorite class that I have ever taught there, well, I'm like beginning etching, but so I taught a class called the 20 Print Challenge. And it is a very, very much an extension of the way that I work in having sort of one thing and you build off of that. And so in the 20 Print Challenge, each student who has a little bit of experience in printmaking works with one plate, and they have to print 20 different prints from that single plate. And they have to change the plate each time that they work. Or do a different method, or because I definitely think printmaking is not just a one-stop shop. You don't make a plate and make something from it. Very similarly to the way that I work, you sort of make a lot of things from one thing and build on that.
Yeah.
And so I think an extension of that would be that class at Pratt. So yeah.
Favorite title?
Favorite title? Oh man.
And as a follow-up, could you tell us where some of the names came?
Yeah.
Tell us some of the names and everything.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to tell you my favorite title is called Throbber.
Throbber, yes.
Why? What? Tell us about that.
So Throbber, Throbber is one of the carbon pieces, and it sort of has these repetitions of mark making that are sort of hard and medium and soft, and so it's this sort of like throb. And so whatever a throbber does, that's what that one does. But yeah, I think a lot about language. Especially in titling things. When I wrote my exhibition statement, it took me, a long time because how can you explain what happens in 18 months of work?
Right.
One page. But I think a lot about language, and I think a lot about language and the duality of language and how it can sort of serve as a way of being very explicit and then also suggestive too. So I think a lot about that in terms of the titles. I think about words that aren't actually words, like slifter.
Right.
I don't think is a word, but now it is. But in previous works, clangor has been sort of a fun one. And a lot of those are, what do I think they do? So maybe it clangs, then it's a clangor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that language is a huge part of what I think about.
So they're really just describing what it is that machine does.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really funny, and sometimes it's really serious. I know I wish I had. I can never remember all of the titles in front of me, but yeah, a lot of them are pretty funny. For specific ones, I can give you a little bit of history too. Yeah.
Oh boy. Does the fact that you have twins ever come through in the structural imagery?
We kind of touched a little bit about that. Yeah, where that sort of a lot of the structures have sort of these two raised points. Whether or not that is descriptive of Willem and JoJo, or that certainly is never a part of it. It's just the idea of two, I would say. Or two things in your life. A lot of times. Being an artist who's a mother, that sort of brings up a lot of questions of different things that you do during the day, different hats that you wear. I think we all struggle with different things that we have, different choices that we make, and different personas that we perceive ourselves as. And so I am interested in that duality.
The duality of man.
We got a lot of questions.
I know.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
They keep coming. Tony Santos says you really owned your art.
Oh, thanks,
Taken
Tony.
and built upon it, like you built the world of architecture, really drawn to it, and the
She's an architect.
and the wabi-sabi.
Oh, yes.
Amanda Olson says, have you ever thought about incorporating text into the works?
No. And only because I don't feel like I have a lot to say. I can say it more with a line than I can with a letter, I guess is what I'm saying. I am interested in, like I said, I am interested in language, but nothing so specific as text. I have incorporated text before, and it sort of is its own thing, and it's a very specific thing that it becomes with text. Just like, you know, I have always toyed with the idea of having a background that's yellow, you know, because once you incorporate that sort of thing, that strategic element, it changes everything. Now it becomes, you know, like, why is the background yellow, or why is the word, you know, bird on it, or why is, you know, so yeah, I would say I don't think I would ever go down that road. But I definitely appreciate people that do put text in their work, because I think it's another level that I'm just not drawn to.
Yeah.
And Kirsten asks, what have been some of your inspirations during COVID?
You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Let's see, I've listened to the Michelle Obama, you know, a couple of times, so that's been amazing. I also listen to a lot of music, tons of music, a lot of music that is rooted in country western, a lot of music that's rooted in sort of classical based things, but I also enjoy just the quiet, really, to have the sound of nothing and just to be focused on the line and the sound of the tool that you're making on the paper with. I think there's something that you will never be able to explain to someone what that's like unless they experience that for themselves. So
do you find that part of your practice meditative?
Totally, yeah. Totally, yeah. I mean, I think just having, you know, just the quiet at night is really wonderful. But I'm certainly not going to turn down a Netflix special too, you know. So I think I'm influenced by a lot of things. I also have been really interested in seeing what other people are doing. Other artists, not only in the Pacific Northwest, but also around the United States and then internationally too, because I think a lot of us are struggling with the idea that we cannot go to our studios like we normally do. So, and that, you know, that includes professional artists, but it's also students. You know, I think I am more engaged with students on a different level than before. I'm answering different questions than before, you know, because we don't have that face-to-face ability. So I think that I definitely have been very interested in what's happening on social media in terms of making. So
there's been a lot. It's really
and
great.
I love that people just keep making stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
I feel like there's something inherent about humanity in that act of things have shut down or slowed down, but things are still being created.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily just artwork. It's you know, cook, sew.
Yeah.
You know, just, I love watching people like doing things and not just sitting around and you know, letting their eyes glaze over, which is fine too.
Which you need it.
We need it. Yeah.
Clive Cowie asks, is making art for you an escape from the everyday world or reckoning with the everyday world?
Right now, it's an escape, I would say. I would definitely say. And only because I'm doing it by myself. So for me to escape into the studio and not have contact with other artists physically, it's been an escape because it's sort of my time. Reckoning would be probably pre-COVID, where we are sort of more permitted to work in a group. And I think that's just how a lot of print shops are run, where it's a lot of collective learning, collective sharing. And you can't really escape that, especially as a print technician. I can't escape students,
right?
Even if I wanted to, you just can't. So I would say, yeah, it has been an escape, and it's been a very blissful escape. You know, I definitely have had very few moments over the last 18 months where I've been frustrated to go to the studio. I've been excited 99.9% of the time.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's just a delight to escape. Yeah.
Peggy Terranova asks, do you have a favorite piece among the amazing pieces?
You know, I would say This one behind me has been sort of a favorite, and only because it was sort of the start of me incorporating the carbon paper into the pieced works. It was a risk, and I forget to take risks. In fact, I teach with Kurt Levitsky at the University of Washington, and during one of his student critiques, that was something that we talked a lot about, was the fact that this is the time to take risks.
Right.
And for me, a risk to make a line on a piece of paper, if that's my risk, then great. But it was enough for me to sort of feel free to make that decision. And I sort of became really, really excited about the possibility of being able to draw on works on paper again,
Right.
and to incorporate it into the current body of work that I was working on with the pieced things, which I love making, yeah.
And this one's titled Aider. Is it
is
because it's
Aider.
aiding you?
Yes, exactly. Yes, I know. It's it did aid me, I guess.
Good.
So I think, yeah, from the pieced works, this one, and then, you know, I am thrilled with the carbon pieces. I'm just ecstatic, and I've made tons more. I can't stop printing them. Can't stop making them. I can't get carbon paper to my house sooner, so thanks post office.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited about the carbon pieces. Yeah, it's been a good jump
for those.
Yeah.
Too. Well, shall we take a few more questions?
And Meg Hartwell just says, thank you for sharing so much detail about your process and your work. And our final question, Ann Olson asks, when your works are finished, do you see forms in them, or do they remain abstract to you?
Oh, definitely forms. Definitely forms. I would say, you know, once they get to, you know, it's hard to contextualize this, but I know when I'm getting close, and that's hard for any artist to sort of spell out. I know when it's getting close because I can sort of see structure. I can see the structure wanting to do something. And when I put that last mark on, it becomes full-fledged that it's possible for that form to do something. Whether it's possible for that form to move or drop something, all of a sudden everything sort of, it comes to the surface, it really bubbles up, and it allows me to sort of see that piece has movement, or that piece can fall down or wants to fall down.
You finished the machine.
You finished the machine a little bit, yeah. And I'm a person that really likes to overdo things, so it's been a really big test to sort of slow down and look at things. And I'm lucky enough to have a space where I can pin things up and to look at it. And believe it or not, I take a lot of cell phone photographs, and looking it on a cell phone is different than looking it in person. So that's been really, really helpful in making some of those decisions too. So yeah, I would say, yeah, they definitely become something that I can identify what they could possibly do once I get to that point.
Well, thank you so much,
yeah,
Kim.
This has been great.
This has been really wonderful. Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in and watching, even for however long you did. And thank you for the wonderful questions. Once again, the show is The Slant of Line, and it's up through September 12th. And we're here Thursday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5. Give me a call, make an appointment. I'd be happy to meet you here. And so you can see the show. And yeah, any final words?
Go and see art.
Go and see art.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And see art in August for the Seattle Deconstructed Art Fair. I can't believe it. All the galleries in the city have opening hours. They're putting on exciting shows. So yeah, please come see art in August. We're here.
Okay.
All right. And now with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.